Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk. As usual, it's your host, Lee, and today I'm very excited. I have Matt Browning of the band Undeath joining me. So, Matt is a killer drummer. I've been a fan of his work ever since I found Undeath in 2019. Beyond that, he's also an illustrator and artist, and he has done all of the album covers for the band since then. Without further ado, Matt, what's up, dude?
Hey, what's up?
Totally blanked on the album name for a second there.
You're good.
It can be hard sometimes. I'm always impressed by like other people who love death metal and stuff who like can just rattle off like song names and album names so well, because at a certain point it's kind of hard to like keep them together. I just have the visuals of the album cover in my head.
I've
You know what
always
I mean?
been good with band names ever since I was a kid, but not with song and album names. I was always good at like identifying a band from the sound, or just knowing a lot of bands. But
Yeah.
the albums can get tricky, especially there's certain albums that growing up I just listened to the CD like in the car all the time.
Mhm.
And like I've listened to some albums like hundreds of times, but I probably couldn't name like half of the songs on there because you're not actually looking at the track as it's coming up. It's just like track 7, track
Totally.
2, you know.
Yeah, unless it's like a really big part of like the chorus or something, which actually on Death, Alexander, he does that like in a lot of ways where you'll know the song name because it's very clear when he's saying it. But
Yeah,
for a lot of bands, it's just like I have no idea. And then there's like that last Nile album, that what the second track with the chapter of the
yeah,
monkeys throwing feces or whatever.
PCs or whatever.
It's crazy shit.
Yeah.
What have you been listening to lately?
I feel like I've kind of been stuck in my ways a little bit.
Yeah.
Just started going back to like the same stuff that I kind of always go back to. Um, I guess like Genesis. I like Genesis a lot.
Yep. Big
Like the
fan.
early Genesis stuff.
Yeah. Do you have a
Um,
favorite album of theirs?
Probably The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Yeah. Classic, man.
Yeah, that's just like the first one that really kind of stuck with me, and I do think it's my personal favorite, regardless. I think, but it's also like the first one that I heard.
Yeah.
Um,
So many good tracks, man.
of the earlier stuff, because I'd always heard like the pop
Invisible Touch and
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, like I knew a lot of that, but Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was like the first Peter Gabriel Genesis stuff that I heard.
We got some killer Phil Collins drumming on that album too.
Yeah,
Like that's probably like
definitely.
him at his prime, right?
Yeah. I think that he is really sick,
Yeah.
especially on. I mean, on all the stuff, but especially on those early albums.
Yeah, I was listening to Trick of the Tail
Yeah.
just a couple weeks back, and it was just like blown away. I think that has Chester Thompson on drums, but
Hmm.
it's a pretty seamless transition from the Gabriel days. I think like it's not that different. I think they
Yeah.
kind of pick up from where he left off. And I like Gabriel's solo stuff a lot too. I've been trying to get a little more into that.
I do too. I've never. I got to give it like more attention. I
Mm.
guess. Like I know a decent amount of it. I just feel like I always go to Genesis,
Yeah,
and yeah, just one day, one day it'll click with me more. I feel like.
totally. Anything else you've been listening to?
Um, let's see. I mean, I like that John Prine self-titled album. I was gonna listen to that.
That's cool.
I've been similar-ish kind of like vein. I've been like, I always knew like Neil Young
Hmm.
stuff, but it kind of like clicked for me more recently. It's not like I didn't like it before, just kind of like got it more recently.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of, that's like a not new, like obviously this stuff's not new, but it's like a not even necessarily new to me, but new in that I've kind of have a new appreciation for it, I guess, you know.
There's so much Neil Young material too,
Yeah.
you know. Well,
And then
like,
like just all the, as far as like metal stuff, I feel like that's always just kind of like the go-to same stuff really. So it's like,
well, I mean, people have like different things they draw from more like,
yeah,
um, well, I guess I want to touch on some of the non-metal stuff for a second. So
yeah,
like you being metal drummer and like one thing that I love about your playing is that it's very groovy and then you know how to like interplay. Like you have such a good relationship with Kyle in terms of like how you guys play off one another. That's like what I loved right when I first heard your like demo back in like 2019
hmm,
was just like those change ups in terms of like time signatures within the riff or just like it feels like it's a different time signature. But
yeah,
like do you how do you typically draw inspiration from like these non-metal like artists and bands into writing and playing?
yeah. Um, I think that there are some metal drummers that there's a good handful of metal drummers that do what I'm about to say,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if they also kind of picked that up from stuff outside of metal. But I like like you were saying that like that groove and like backbeat and sort of not over complicating things,
Yeah.
which for a minute there in metal was very like was the opposite of that. Like I feel like especially like in the early 2000s, a lot of the more extreme metal that I was hearing at the time was like insane. Like I wouldn't necessarily call it all overplaying. That makes it sound like bad. But it was the style at the time. I feel like was to play a lot.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
how fast can you play double bass and how fast can you blast beat, and not only that, but like how many crazy like fills and things all the time and switching, like not playing the same beat for more than 10 seconds and then doing a fill and playing a different beat, or like
Yeah. The listener can never just like rest. Like you
yeah,
can't really imagine how the listener's going to react in terms of like headbanging and what that pulse is.
yeah, which I think that some of that stuff is cool. I love a lot of that stuff. I think it was just never me. Like I just never felt like playing that way, I guess.
Yeah,
And I
totally.
think I just gravitated more towards drummers who just kind of were there to provide like a backbeat and have a good feel. Like I love like the feel of a drummer
Yeah.
more than like how technically good they are or how fast they can play or like any of the other stuff, you know what I mean? And there's definitely metal drummers that have that feel, uh, which I'm sure we'll talk about more at some point. But I mean, like Dave Lombardo or something, you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
he's a metal drummer that, especially for at the time, like despite playing fast for that time, just never lost the feel, and compared to that stuff that came later, he's like not even fast or like whatever, like
Right. The bar's been raised.
right, but like still fast, and he still never lost the feel. He's like always he's always just got that going. And I think that is kind of what I look for.
I mean, so much of it comes down to what you're saying, like with feel, but like creative writing in part, like of the drum parts themselves, instead of it just being about the showcase of skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also in our songs, like early on when Kyle and I started playing together, it's like a lot of his riffs were very in the way that they were kind of going together, very kind of like winding sometimes, and almost like you're listening to it first and it's like very confusing. And I feel like it was kind of cool, and the idea like very early on was that I want to kind of like, because the riffs are that way, I want to almost make it not sound that way by trying to like uh, make the changes in the parts or the modulations or like time signature changes feel like fluid, and like signify like, oh, it's like it changed here, like we're in the next part, and then it like, oh, it changed here, we're in that part, versus sort of playing over the top of all of that. And can be cool, but it makes it so different because it would quickly just become like a crazy, chaotic, as far as like the listener hearing like what part of the song are we in,
Yeah.
Like, where's the beat, like, you know,
you make it like really interpretable, like
exactly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Or at least that's what I try to do, so.
No, I mean, you do a great job, man. Because just thinking about when I saw you guys live, and I mean that was even 4 years ago, so you guys have grown since then. You know, you could just look around the crowd, and you were opening band, like you were number one, and like you got to win that crowd over. But I remember looking around and people like really understood it and like processed it. And like Black Dahlia fans, some of them maybe don't listen to metal that heavy, you know what I mean? Because they're kind of like one of those bands that I feel like they can kind of appeal to the metalcore type of fan base and kind of push them just a little bit farther towards death metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how do you, like, just being in the room and writing and playing along with these things, like how do you think you guys have shifted musically in the last 4 years? I mean, critics have their opinions, right? But like from being in the band, how do you see it?
I don't think that it has really changed that much, or, and I'm sure there are some people that do feel that way, that it hasn't changed that much. I know there's also probably people that think like, oh, they sound nothing like they used to sound, or there's like there's a melodic part or something, and I'm like, there's always been parts like that. Even on the demo 19 that we did was full of little guitar lead melodic parts and the same kind of I mean, I think the only thing that changed like pretty quickly from like the first demo into the second and then into Lesions was maybe just like tightening up the songwriting a little bit. Like we wanted to just sort of have like clear songs. Like I love some like ignorant kind of like death metal where it all is like you put the album on and you can't really tell one song from the next. It's just like a nonstop like assault of like just winding riffs and blast beats, and it, like that stuff is sick. But I think there's like a lot of that, and we're kind of like, you know, wanted each song to like be a song, where like, you know, oh, it's this song now that sounds different than the song that was before it, and I think we kind of like really focused on that which it was pretty natural progress. It's not like we were really forcing it. We just kind of were going that way anyways. And that kind of happened right in the first album. And yeah, we kind of just been doing that.
Yeah, I agree.
You know,
I mean, to put you on the spot, I was just curious, but like I agree. I think the biggest jump really is, like this to this. Sorry, people can't see, but like that's where I noticed anything, and then from there, I mean, I did listen to a couple songs from each album just to kind of compare, and I will say the production on this one and the recording is definitely it's clearer and it's. I mean, I like the mix better. So like I think the sound has improved, but I don't see it as like a drastic change at all.
Yeah, I think that the production changes between the 3 full-length albums are like, and I don't want to speak for people, but I feel like that is what people hear, kind of whether they think so or not, as like if someone thinks that they sound way different,
right?
As far as like the songwriting and our kind of idea of like going into it
and live, what you actually are. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and shift that much.
Because I feel like I mean the first album we did in 2 days.
Oh my god!
At least the drums, guitar, and bass we did in 2 days. We drove down to Philly to record with a friend who we knew through some other friends who worked at the studio called Headroom in Philly. His name was Scoops, the guy that we recorded with. Kyle and I drove down. Our budget was like $1,000 or something.
Yeah, it's low.
And we had like we had no money of our own to put into it, you know. And so we were there for 2 days. We got there the first day, set up drums. I did like half of the drum tracks that day. Woke up early the next day, finished drums. Kyle did all the guitar tracks that afternoon, and then the following morning, so I guess like 2.5 days, following morning, Kyle also did all the bass. And then we drove home and we did vocals ourselves at home with Alex, and then sent those tracks down to Scoops. Yeah.
So yeah, and then how does that compare to the last record then in terms of time and process?
Yeah, so the last one we had, it took a long time, to be honest, longer than I think we were expecting, but there was some moments in there that were sort of like a break in the middle of it. But I think including like the break time, it was like 5 weeks. I spent a week doing drums, and then I hung around for a little bit, and then I left. And that's kind of how it had to, like, some people were in and out.
Yeah.
Because it's a long time to just be there. We were all in a room.
You got to give people space too. A little
bit.
We
were all in like a room. You can't see this whole room, but it's like small room, you know, with 2 bunk beds and a couch, and there's 5 of us in there. You know, so it was fine. Yeah, we had a great time, but to be in there for 5 weeks would be a lot, I think, with 5 people in there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's definitely the most time I've had to record drums, and we worked on like a kind of like a 8 to 5 schedule. Like I'd get up around 7:30 or so, eat a little breakfast, warm up, and then maybe around 9 or so we'd like start recording and work until lunch, take a break, come back, do the afternoon, and then stop for the night, that was way different for me too, because I was used to, like I was saying on that first album, going until go till like 10:30, 11 p.m. just like work straight through the day until you're like exhausted, and then stop. Which is something kind of nice about just getting it done that way.
Right.
But also nice to be able to take your time and try things out and not feel so pressured.
Is that largely how you think like the extra time allowed you to do that, like to experiment with like different fills or feels, or were you guys even like changing some of the song structures at that point, or you pretty much had
Like,
those down?
a little bit. The way we kind of settled on doing it is before we do the song, I'd go in with Kyle, sometimes Kyle and Jared, and we would just like kind of jam the song. Like we do some like just takes of playing the song, kind of figure out like you know, how's the speed, like should this part be faster, slower, like listen back to it. And that was nice to kind of get that sort of in the moment real time like feedback of hearing it back. And so we do that until we're happy with kind of what we had. And then I would do the actual drum tracks. So not a ton changed, but there were definitely a few songs where we did last minute change, maybe like a transition or maybe just the tempo of the song. Like we're like, oh, this should be faster, slower, whatever. And it was nice to be able to have those details, have time to figure out those details.
Yeah.
That being said, I think there is something cool still about, just going in and just doing it. And you know what I mean? It's like there's no time to. I mean, on the first album, there's like lots of parts where I'm like, why did I play it like that? Like, because now even live, I don't play it like that anymore.
Yeah.
Which I also like doing that. I feel like why not just keep changing a song if you want to, but there's lots of parts in there that I just kind of did that way because that's just how I did it at that time. And it was just very in that moment, I guess,
Totally. That's, maybe one reason why live albums still exist and like musicians like releasing live albums, because it's like they hear themselves more sometimes in like that current moment of time. Because I like to listen to live albums quite a bit too. They don't get talked about as much as like studio records and stuff, but when you can like capture that actual live recording really well, it's pretty compelling.
Yeah, we want to do more live albums, I think.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't listen to a ton of live albums like all the time, but they are cool to check out, especially if it's a band that you like. It's cool to just hear what do they sound like at that moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Kind of shifting a little bit to the art side of it then. So, I mean, you've been doing art since the beginning for the band, so 2019, right? Do you recall like how that kind of conversation went? Like you like talk with Connor, like, hey, what do you think of this? Or how did that kind of work out?
Yeah, so Kyle and I met through just the music scene here being that show, I was playing in different bands, and he hit me up because we're both like, metalhead guys, you know what I mean? We're looking to play metal music, but never really found someone to do it with. So we met, hit me up, we started, just jamming death metal stuff. And coincidentally, like at that exact same time, before I even met him, I was working on like the demo 19 cover, which at that time wasn't for that yet. I just happened to be doing it. It's like the castle.
You were just drawing it?
Yeah, basically. I was just doing that like on my own. And it just coincided with starting this band.
Just here on the left, right?
Yeah. And so I already had that, and I was like, hey, like, what do you think of this? And he was like, it's sick. Let's do a logo. And I did 2 different logos. I did that one that ended up on the cover, and I did another one that is not on any releases, and I'm not even sure where I'd find it. I think I have a shirt with it, and it kind of looks like what the final logo ended up being.
Okay.
But less of that. It's just like
less detailed and shit.
Yeah, it's just like it's thinner. There's less like skulls and bones and stuff. It's just more straightforward. Similar look, but more straightforward.
Okay.
So at that time, I had drawn those 2 logos, and we ended up going with the skull logo, which is funny now in hindsight because it's the only one that has a different logo.
Yeah.
But yeah, the drawing I was just doing, so it just worked out that way because we were just starting the band at the time, and we recorded those songs ourselves in the practice space very poorly, and Kyle sent them to a friend who did the mixing and mastering on them, but like probably everything we sent him was all fucked up, and he was like, "What am I supposed to do with this?" You know?
Yeah.
So, and that's the same thing with the second one. We recorded that ourselves, and probably messed everything up on that too.
That one made a lot of waves, though, man. I mean, that's when I first found you guys, and like, I love that. Do you consider it a demo or EP? What do you call it? Is Sentient?
We called it an EP, so we felt like it sounded good enough.
Yeah.
To be an EP and not a demo, even though it is not recorded professionally by any means, you know.
Yeah.
But for that one, then obviously we had the logo that we didn't use on the first one, and Kyle and I were just talking about it, and we're just like, what if it was more skulls on the bottom?
Yeah.
A classic more skulls situation. So I just redid it and added more stuff to the bottom.
And I recall too, I have the pull the plug patches of lesions of a different kind, and you had to like simplify the logo down, or somebody did, because they couldn't print it at that size with the level of detail.
Yeah, this logo has been it's funny because like when we started, so because that was on the second demo or EP or whatever, I had no expectation of like what this band was going to be or anything, and I had no experience with like doing like shirt designs or printing stuff or like just anything to do with like the technical side of like reproducing
Yeah.
the drawing. So I just kind of like did this, and I was like, oh, that'd be cool. Like you don't see like a non flat logo very often.
Right.
Thinking that we just put it on the demo cover or whatever, and that it would just not really be an issue. But it's been a headache ever since then.
So, how many people do you think you've pissed off through this logo?
Like probably at least 20.
Yeah.
Because it's just been a pain in so many different ways to like reproduce it and to use it to do different things like pins or patches or like embroidery.
Mm-hmm.
I think at one point it got sent to like a embroidery place, and they were just like, or maybe it was, I think it was a enamel pin or something.
Oh yeah.
And they were just like, what are we supposed to do with this? And I was gonna redraw it simplified, but every time I try to do that, I just can't do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just feels like I'm like too close to it, and I just like did it that way, and it's like been frustrating every time I've tried to like go back and be like, I'm gonna make it simplified, but then I'm like, but what? How do I even do that?
How many times have you attempted that?
Probably 5 or 6 times.
Damn.
It doesn't go very far. But I've sat down probably 5 or 6 times with the intention of doing it and then gave up after like 10, 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's hard, man, because it's also iconic as well, and it's a conversation starter for sure.
Yeah, so I'll probably just leave it alone and just struggle through, or I guess I don't have to struggle through it, but make other people struggle through it.
I guess so, yeah. So with each album, then you've done, the covers and stuff. How does that, process work? Like, do you get input from the other band members, or you pitch an idea and you go for it, or has it just been different every time?
So the first one, like I said, I was just kind of already doing that. Mm-hmm. And the style that I did on that one, I had just done a painting a couple months prior on a piece of cardboard, because for the longest time I was just painting and like making art with like the cheapest stuff that I could like get my hands on or find or whatever. So I had like a piece of cardboard, and I like glued like a piece of paper on top of it, and it got all like wrinkly, kind of like had like weird wrinkles all through it. And I was like, I kind of did it on purpose, and then I did a painting that kind of like followed some of those lines, and it made this like swiggly, like drippy kind of looking like face thing that I made. And that painting I would point to as like the start of kind of almost everything in a way that I did after that, because then I was like, oh, I like that one, I'm gonna make this castle. And that was just a pen on paper. And but I was like, what if I did the castle in that swiggly, like very detailed, lots of lines like overlapping and underlapping kind of style. And I was using some like pointillism on there. So I'd kind of do like make like these little tube lines, like 2 lines for each line, and then like dot in the lines.
Okay.
And from there to the next one, Kyle and I were working on these songs, and a lot of that comes from the lyrics that Kyle wrote for the songs. And we're always kind of into like an idea of, even if it's like mostly just for ourselves, of the sort of like world building kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're like looking at the lyrics and kind of creating this like story of what's happening. And I kind of just took those ideas and put it together into this demo cover, where there's like at the bottom, like in some of the lyrics, and Kyle's talking about this sort of like skeleton army coming out of the ground, like a hell portal opening up into the ground. Yeah, and then like these alien things coming in and they're fighting each other, and I could remember more of it back then, but there is like more.
It's like 5 years, 6
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
Everything is like supposed to be connected somehow to what was going on with the lyrics.
I feel like the art just like perfectly captures the sound of that album. And like, I love that there's the green text on top of it too. And that little like swirly kind of like hypnosis looking door, I always kind of thought was like an interesting detail too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always thought that this cover just like, I don't know. It takes like the parts of like outsider art that I really like. Like it seems a little like off the wall. And then I listen to the music. I'm like, shit, not only can these guys play, but like they do sound different than all the other bands that are kind of coming out around that same time. Because 2019 was like a very pivotal change in death metal, I think. 2018, 2019. But it's really cool, man. Thanks. So then for Lesions, let me make sure I'm getting in the right order here. I have another image here too, but what do you recall from making this one? And I have the shirt on too. It's on white. I think I got from Night Shift back in 2020.
Nice. So this one was the first like full color thing that I did for the band, and sort of just building off of the last one that I did in pen. I was like, what if I just tried doing that pen style, but going back to paint, and try to keep some of that like lots of swiggly lines, kind of slimy, sort of trippy looking spots where you can't really quite tell what's going on exactly. Because I like that a lot about the both the demo ones. Really, is a bit of like the confusion that kind of happens.
Yeah.
Between like foreground and background or any of that, because there's just so many like lines and stuff that it becomes like different shapes kind of appear that I didn't even necessarily mean to happen. That's like, you know.
Yeah, totally.
So, and the idea of this one, I can't really remember. I feel like maybe Kyle was like, there should be a guy like getting his head chopped off, because the first lyric of Suitably talks about like putting an axe in your head, you know. So again, like connecting it to lyrics. And I think as far as like the guy being attached by this like cord into this sentient like cave being thing, like I think I just kind of came up with that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, just kind of roll with it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I think almost all of your art is weird. It's intriguing though. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah,
signature. Like it definitely looks like you have like consistent look, which is really cool. I like the
thanks.
color choice on this one as well. Like those like maroon burgundies contrasting with the green. It's pretty sweet. And then like you still have a good sense of like negative space. Like, you have an area where the eye naturally draws to, and then like it gives a little bit of reprieve, but then you have all that detail on the side. So it's this one, I feel like while there is all that detail, like you can pick it up in a glance, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. Because and yeah, I remember like purposely wanting to make it daytime outside, just so it was like also kind of different,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it like that bright area outside kind of stand out more, which is also where like the main figures are standing, which is something that I've always, for the most part, liked doing. Like I kind of hate painting or drawing bodies and stuff, but
Yeah,
I was kind of like having a main focus of like some sort of action happening or like just
definitely.
and yeah, I painted this on paper,
Oh, really?
like I think it was just like Bristol board paper or something, uh and I kind of just like figured it out as I went because I'd never done that before,
Mm-hmm.
and it's acrylic, and I definitely encountered like some problems and learned things while I was doing it.
From the surface, so working on Bristol was tough.
Yeah, and I think like I mean it's acrylic, so it's nice you can paint over
Yeah,
things, but also like the paper can only really take that specific paper could only really take like so much painting over. I feel like
oh yeah, no, I totally can understand.
yeah,
Yeah, I been there before in terms of learning the importance of surface. So I
yeah.
feel yeah.
But I was working again with limited space and budget, and it just felt like going with a piece of paper, and I think I just taped it to like a shoebox that I kind of put like a ruler, like a piece under the lid of the shoebox to like hold it at an angle
Yeah,
open, and then I could like just like close it and move it off the table and then bring it back and like set it back up easily,
like MacGyvering it, man. That's cool. Um, so overall, would you say you like painting more than like pen and ink drawing, or just kind of like them about equally? Like, how do you feel about that?
um, I like it both equally.
Yeah,
I don't. I like. I think I like pretty much anything except for oil paint.
mm,
I don't really like oil paint that much. I honestly haven't really like tried it that much, but I think I tried it maybe literally one time, and I think it's like it could be cool. I think I could do well with it, but I'm like so maybe stubborn and impatient about having to like get the other stuff you need to
right.
do
The
oil
drying
paint.
time's intense too.
Yeah, that I just like I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah,
It's like I'd rather just like deal with using anything else, I guess. So
I feel you. Have you? I'm curious because I feel like you might like them. Have you experimented with like alcohol markers, like Copic markers? You ever tried
no,
those?
I don't even know what those are.
Yeah. So you get them, online or like art supply store.
Yeah.
1 second. So they are a bit pricey, so you'd want to just get like a good set of colors. But essentially, I'll go a little bigger here. But they look like this. These are Copic sketch markers.
Mm-hmm.
But you can layer them. You could do them on Bristol, no problem. You can like make cool color combinations. But it's just a good way of like coloring ink drawings or things kind of like that.
Is it like a washy kind of color, or it's like really saturated?
It depends. They have various saturations or like levels of like transparency. It's coated on the markers, but I'd say for the most part, you can get pretty colorful and saturated.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I wrote it down.
Yeah, Copic. So like a lot of in like the 80s and 90s and stuff, amongst a lot of other tools, a lot of anime movies were made using like markers and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's just a really easy tool to pick up.
Yeah, that sounds safe.
Because I'm with you, man. Like I like stuff that I can clean up pretty quickly. It doesn't take a ton of prep. So like for me, watercolors, pen and ink, and then I do really enjoy the markers.
Yeah. Yeah, those markers sound like something that I would be into. Check those out.
Yeah. And like getting a set of like, I don't know, 12, 15 colors, like that's a good way to just like start and figure it out. And then a lot of things like, so with a lot of my work is in grayscale. And I know that if I'm doing screen printing, it won't be able to pick it up unless you're like printing in gray. Mm-hmm. But I can get like some interesting smooth gradations and then play that with like hatching and pen and ink so that it kind of has a little bit of a painterly look, just a little bit.
Yeah.
So I just have a whole bunch of gray markers, for instance, and a lot of artists just use gray, but the colors are great too.
Do you ever do like, I guess, multimedia? I don't know if that's the right word. Like use them in combination with,
yeah, like mixed media.
Yeah, mixed media.
Yeah, all the time. Like I just did a piece that I did watercolor wash, then an ink wash, then like just saturated ink, not diluted at all. So it has a little bit of comic book look, but then the painterly aspect of the washes. And then I would use the markers just for little areas where I wanted to shade it more, and I just use the gray. And it's very much like just a subtle little correction thing for that last piece. And then there's other ones where you could do markers in combination with colored pencil pretty easily as well. Mm-hmm. So lay down marker, and then the colored pencil is right on top of it. So there's a lot of things. I mean, colored pencils also are very underrated too.
I love, speaking of colored pencils, like, I don't know how they received amongst the like serious artists or whatever, but I love the watercolor pencils.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I feel like they're great because it's easy to switch between, like, you can use them for both, you can just put down a lot of color and then get it to where you want it, and then hit it with some water and blend stuff together, and then come back and add more lines over the top or whatever,
Definitely, man. I mean,
fair bit.
I've always been advocate for those mediums that a lot of people kind of like, I don't know what shit on. I mean, most serious artists like that have made it or like have been through the years of the difficulty of being an artist. If you're good with any of those mediums, they're not going to say shit. They're going to be like, hell yeah, awesome. Like, because it just comes down to skill and determination. Like, I shout him out a lot because I think I genuinely do believe he is one of the best visual artists in the metal and music industry. But Merald, who's done like album covers for Mortuous and done work for Mastodon and all these different bands, he works in colored pencil. So if he's working in colored pencil, like no one's gonna shit on him because the guy's unreal.
Yeah, there's no, or there shouldn't be
No,
right or wrong thing to use.
No, and then colored pencil like is challenging to get right, but there's a lot of like Facebook groups for just people who work in colored pencil. Like there's a lot of colored pencil wildlife artists, so they'll take like a picture of an owl or something, and then they'll do a very realistic depiction of it or stylized, but it's all impressive for the most part. So, yeah, I'd say markers and perhaps colored pencils, man. But like, I don't even do acrylic painting because I can kind of get the look that I want with mixed media approach of watercolor and some of these other tools.
Yeah,
because colored pencil, man, it the directness and like you have the color in your hand. You don't have to mix it, and there's like a little bit of like fudging with that.
Definitely. Yeah.
But back on track for I was ranting, but what about, sorry, I put these in different auras, so I keep bouncing out. But here on the left, we have It's Time to Rise from the Grave. So I feel like this one, from like a technical ability perspective, is definitely a step up. Like you did a really good job, and then it also seems like it would just be more challenging than the previous one. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it definitely was, which was on purpose. I think like I just learned a lot from doing the first one.
Yeah.
And just took that knowledge and went into this one. And I also just like, I don't know, like spent more time on the planning of it.
Mm-hmm.
And also had to do some techniques and things that I had never done before to make it come across like how I wanted to, like the fog,
Yeah,
and the lightning. It's acrylic paint also, and I painted this one on wood.
Okay.
Like a wood panel, and it's bigger than the Legions one as well. So
that's two advantages. You got a sturdy surface, and you got a bigger, surface, so you can play around with that a bit more. So did that help a ton? Those two decisions.
And so like by this point, the apartment that I was in, I had like my own dedicated area that I just could leave it up all the time, and I also had an easel, which I kind of would switch between putting it on the easel and putting it on the desk, just at like a slight angle, depending on if I wanted it more flat or wanted it more like a drawing surface.
Right. That makes sense.
And having it bigger was also nice because you could just not have to get so like microscopic with the details, even though I still did. I feel like, which is, I guess, on the flip side of the bigger it is, in a way, the less details you have to do. But if you're not careful, you can also like, because it's bigger, when you get into those little details, once it's like finished and you take a picture of it, whatever, and it shrinks down, it becomes like those tiny details become really small.
Yeah.
And it can almost get lost.
And I think, because I've been there before and I still find myself in that trap. It's just like sometimes you kind of just realize that some details don't matter as much as others. You know what I mean? Like they're not all perfectly weighted in terms of importance on the success of a piece.
Yeah, for sure. And Yeah, it took a while. This one was tricky too. There's a lot of, I started with the sky in the top left corner, and I
Mm,
wasn't even like really trying to do that. I think I kind of like I'd done a bunch of sketches. I had gotten a bunch of reference photos from the cemetery, Mount Hope Cemetery nearby. Um, Kind of put together this like idea that Kyle and I had been talking about, and then I transferred that sketch over to the board after I put down some like white gesso or like something like that, uh, and I kind of felt like stuck there for a second,
hmm
and so I just kind of like went for it eventually. And the sky part is kind of a result of that, I guess. I just kind of started putting paint down, and I wanted it to be kind of colorful sunset, like vibrant sky, and I kind of just went fairly like heavy right away, which is kind of like, I know, different than some people would do, or maybe I would even do now. Is like a lot of times you start kind of with more washy kind of colors and build up from there, but I feel like sometimes I have a hard time with that.
hmm
And I just kind of went down, like, the paint in that area is pretty thick, actually. It's like just straight, no water in it or anything. It's just like straight
Right out
acrylic
of the tube.
paint, like down. Uh, yeah. And then after I did that, it kind of just, just like starting sometimes is the hard part. And then once I did
Definitely.
that, I was immediately excited about how that was looking. And the rest of it just kind of came from there. Did the mountains after that. And
Yeah.
the bricks took me, the stone bricks took me a long time. Uh, Talking about like detail, I feel like some people could do those really quick just by sort of focusing more on the value of each one and just sort of creating like the idea of there being bricks there. Um, but again, I was like not very good at that, so I'm like, I gotta paint like each stone individually, like detail on each one of them.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to do that.
No, I can relate. And in like, do you find that those stones like were those details that at the end you think all that time paid off, or do you think there could have been some like areas that having done it or having learned from the outcome, like you would have done a little bit differently in terms of like maybe some broader strokes or something?
Yeah, I can say that I might do it differently, but I probably wouldn't. I feel like it's just how I do it.
Yeah.
Like I think I just like have a hard time doing it any other way. So
I think they inherently take quite a bit of time, but
yeah,
I know what you mean.
uh,
Uh, in terms of the original paintings, do you have all of them, or have you sold any of them?
I have them. Yeah,
That's cool.
have, I should have grabbed some of them. We moved recently, so some of the stuff is like not lost, but I just have not gotten to it yet.
Oh, that's cool. Are you still in the same area of like New York?
Yeah, I'm in Rochester still.
What's the like Rochester music scene like overall?
Um, so I guess I'd preface by saying that I'm actually not from Rochester. I've lived here for over 8 years now. But I'm actually Tommy and I and Undeath are from the DMV area, Virginia,
Okay.
and I've lived here for 8 years. Though the other members of the band are all upstate New York guys. Specifically, Alex, I know, like went to high school and all that in Rochester area. So, but when I moved here, I felt like the opportunity here in the music scene was great because it was much smaller, but there was still stuff happening. But it was much easier to be like, hey, like, we just started a band. Like, can we get on this show
Yeah.
of this other band that's coming through? Or can we, like, set up a show or whatever? It was, like, relatively easy to do that compared to, I feel like, an area where where it's like very clicky, maybe, or there's already sort of like an established local band that plays on every show that comes through, and
Yeah.
they'll never have a different band play, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So in that sense, it was great. Like, I was able to move here and play more shows than ever before, and then meet Kyle eventually, and start our band, and very quickly hop on metal shows. And at that point, we are just a 3-piece, so just Alex, Kyle, and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd play every show, and someone would be like, "Man, that was so sick! Like, you guys need a bass player, though." And we're like, we know, but we were just waiting to find the right person, I guess. Yeah.
And that person was Tommy.
Yeah, so Tommy, actually, we played a show with Tommy's band Tomb Warden in Rochester, who I saw were from close by where I grew up, because I actually didn't know Tommy before, despite the fact that we were at like dozens of the same shows,
Yeah.
like when I was younger and growing up. So I saw they're from the same area as me, and started talking to him. We got his contact info. We saw some videos of him playing bass or something. He was like, he's sick. And we had him come up. And yeah, I mean, he showed up and like knew all the songs that we had
Perfect.
taught him to learn. And it just was like immediately like a natural fit. Like, we didn't have to really say much of anything to him, beyond like probably the stuff that Kyle sent that was wrong or something like that. The wrong way.
I mean, so much of it comes down to personalities, though, too. Like just a cultural fit, within the band.
For sure. Yeah. Can't remember where we were.
I don't know. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to, before I forget, though, touch on the newest album cover then. So, once again, keeping the theme of weird album covers. Now, this is cool because it wraps around the front and the back of the LP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that's pretty sick. So, with each one, you are becoming more ambitious. So
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about this.
Yes, I mean, you're exactly right. I was like, each time I was like, I gotta kind of just want to do something that evolves a little bit from the other ones. This the front cover half of this image comes from a line in the song More Insane, where he says, "My head, a catacomb," even though it's not a catacomb necessarily. It just got us thinking about this idea. I think I really gotta like. Kyle was like, we had been talking about some different ideas, and he was like, "What if some of those ideas that we were talking about was that I wanted it to be maybe something." So, all right, I got to go back. So the first one is in the cave. The second one, it's like outside looking up at a mountain. And we're like, so the third one would be zoomed out like even further. So we were
Okay.
thinking of like, what if it's like a whole like planet or like something really far out. And I was kind of like trying to do some sketches. And I just didn't like how that was looking. It
Yeah.
felt like too far zoomed out, right? And yeah, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I think we were on tour in England or something, and we had finished playing the show. We were having a couple drinks, and Kyle was like, "What if it's like the front's like a head split open, and then you're like, oh, and there's like a cemetery inside the head, and that is where it like zooms back even further out, so that in that sense it is zoomed out even further, but at the same time there's something like close still, so there's actually like a subject still, and it's not just like a planet or just
Right.
some like random shit like that, so yeah, that's the idea of it. The back
Well, then you got the
side,
members. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
the back side of it was like a nod to the Somewhere in Time Iron Maiden cover,
Really?
which I had this memory when I was a kid of looking at my dad's cassette tapes and seeing the album cover to that album. It's like, that one's like
Oh yeah.
Future, where he's got the laser gun, whatever. And just being like, I want to hear that album, but I was like too young to even like, I was really young. Like I couldn't even like, didn't even know how like a tape worked really, you know what I mean? Uh, but I just have that like image in my head. I've always loved that album cover because of that, and I've always thought that it was sick that he painted the band members like into the cover. Um, so I was like, what if I painted us in it instead of doing like a band photo or something? Which there's nothing wrong with a band photo, but we're always kind of like just, I don't know, like we're just gonna stand there
Yeah.
and have a photo and put it on the back.
When the day actually comes for the photos to be taken,
Right.
it's just kind of like, all right, what do we do? What do we do
So
with our hands?
yeah, I think it was that idea from the Iron Maiden album cover combined with kind of being like, I don't want to give up like any creative direction to like anyone outside of the band, honestly. And like, not that like the photo could be sick, but I was just like, I just kind of want to do it all within the band.
Yeah.
And paint us into it. It would just be like different and keep all of the creative control, I guess. Within, you know.
That's cool, man. I mean, once again, it's an Undeath album cover, and you have like this consistent vision of like death metal with a little bit of like bizarre added into it. Reminds me somewhat of like some of the Impetigo like album art from a while back, like when they were starting out and stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. And that one I painted with gouache.
Oh, okay. How was that?
I liked it a lot, and I think that might even be my new full color
Hmm.
medium of choice. Like I like that. Uh, in my head, at least, which I might be totally wrong, I was like thinking of it like if acrylic could blend like oil paint or something. I know it's closer to like a watercolor, but the difficult thing about acrylic always sometimes is blending it.
Hmm.
But with the gouache, you could still lay down thick, very saturated areas just like you could with acrylic, but you can then also wash it out,
Yeah.
and you can also water it down and paint uh, really transparent washes and build up layers and stuff like that. So especially when I was like knew I was going to be doing a face with a lot of skin tone, uh, which in the past I have found sometimes difficult to do with acrylic with the way that I use them at least. I felt like I needed to try something else out. So I had seen other people using gouache and went with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I use gouache as well. Um, Mostly for like little details here and there, but I totally agree. And even like really old gouache paintings, like you could put a brush with a little bit of water and still lift it up. Like
Yeah,
that amount of like forgivability and like being able to lift it up, like regardless of time, is pretty cool.
yeah.
Do you in terms of, you might not be familiar with it, but do you know who Alex Ross is? The comic book artist?
No.
I'll put some images up, but he works exclusively in gouache. He has a style that it's akin to a little bit of like kind of that 1950s, 40s kind of like Norman Rockwell style, but he does it with like superheroes. He's really well regarded in that world. But if you want to see some like really good usage of gouache to like study from,
Hmm.
Alex Ross would be great to kind of
Alex
like,
Ross.
yeah, I'll put some images here in post for anybody watching. But
Yeah.
I have a book of his work just to like look at it if I ever want to like know what's possible within just
Yeah.
purely gouache.
I'm terrible with artist names and just like art in general sometimes. Like yeah, I'm just so bad at like
I mean,
name
it's,
artists and keeping up with stuff like that sometimes.
I mean, I can totally relate. And I think too, it's like, there were periods of my life where drumming was the thing that I was taking really seriously. And then drawing was just the thing that I would do every once in a while. And it was very much like just a hobby. And I did like art for my band back in the day, but it's completely flipped. Whereas art's the thing that I, focus all my energy on.
Yeah.
So I've kind of like been in both camps, which is also why I like having like drummers who also paint and draw. Like that's like the perfect combo for a guest because I like to geek out about both things.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, though, what like advice would you have for somebody who wants to be in a band that's trying to take it to the next level? So that level could be anywhere, but just like any general advice you would have for musicians who maybe are just local, but they want to do some like regional touring and maybe, kind of get a little more notoriety.
Um I'd say like first off, from my experience in Undeath, we could have like Kyle and I could have just like waited to start playing shows and stuff like that until we had our fully formed band, right? We started writing the demo stuff and recording that before we had even asked Alex to be in the band. So we just kind of started doing it. We had already written all the stuff. We had already even, I think, recorded some of it. And then we sent it to Alex. And we asked like, hey, you want to do vocals for the Death Metal band? And he was like, hell yeah. I think if we had just asked him before recording or writing anything, he probably still would have said yes. But you know how that goes when people are like, hey, you want to like start this band, and you just talk about it forever, but no one actually does it. I think the fact that we just started doing it and we're like, we're going to make this happen no matter what, worked to our benefit. Because when we sent it to him, he was like, hell yeah, I'll do that. And we're like, all right, we're ready to do it now. Like, just like next week, and we can start doing vocals. And we're like, all right. So we did the vocals, and then we're like, get offered to play a show, and we only have guitar player, drums, and vocals. And we're like, let's just start playing shows, and we'll find someone through playing shows who will eventually sort of come to us to play bass and then guitar. And I think if we sort of hesitated on putting ourselves out there, that none of that stuff would have happened. Yeah, so
really
I guess my advice would be to don't wait. If you are waiting, don't wait for something to happen that might not happen. Just start doing it with what you have right now, even if that's just yourself.
Yeah. It's excellent advice, man. And it kind of comes to like art too. I mean, you did the art for the demo and then the albums from there. You've gotten better at that skill at the same time. And there really wasn't any waiting, right? You just took initiative and were like, all right, we got the music. I can do the art too. So it correlates to there as well.
Yeah. And I think similarly with my art, like I was talking about, I've always been sort of like a work with what you've got. And that's similar to what I was talking about with starting the band and music as well. It's like, oh, I can't afford all this fancy equipment or these new tools or whatever. It's like, all right, then just use a piece of paper and a pen or something. Like, you know what I mean? You can get a piece of paper and a pen. Maybe from there you can find a piece of cardboard or get a piece of box and buy some cheap acrylic paint and do something with that. It's like, I always try to work within the confines, I guess, of what I'm able to do, but not let it limit creativity, I guess. Or like it doesn't mean it's going to be worse just because you can't afford like oil paints or expensive gouache or whatever. You just got to make something happen, I feel like, and adapt to what you have.
Definitely, man. Well, for everybody watching, thank you so much. It was a pleasure, Matt. Whenever you guys are on tour in Atlanta, definitely got to meet up at the merch table at the very least, say hi. But you guys are kicking back on tour, some shows coming up relatively soon, right?
Yeah,
like April or so.
It's like the second half of April into the first half of May.
Awesome.
And cool. That's the yeah.
Do you know who you're playing with?
Yeah, it's Dying Fetus and I think Cradle of Filth.
The diverse lineup. All right, cool.
And there's other bands too. It's like a not a fest, but it's like I guess like a small fest. There's like I think 8 bands or something like that. You know what I mean?
That sounds cool to me.
Yeah.
Oh man, get the goth kids to mosh, and it'll be very interesting.
Yeah, that is a funny. It's like a co-headliner, so they're switching off, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
Or maybe Cradle of Filth is headlining every night, but still, Dying Fetus, Cradle of Filth.
I mean, I like both bands, so it's fine by me. You know,
I feel
I'm
like
still a Cradle fan to this day. You know, and the new single they released, I thought was pretty dang good, man.
Yeah.
So
I think despite them being pretty different, a lot of people like both bands, and also a lot of people, especially at shows like that, which is cool, are just there for metal music. You know, it could be any kind of metal music. They're just there to be like, you know.
yeah, absolutely, and it's diverse show, right? You don't want a bill where it's all bands that sound even fairly similar. I like it when it's a big shake up.
Yeah.
But anyways, for everybody watching, if you don't mind liking and subscribing, definitely helps out. Trying to do episodes every week, maybe every other week, every once in a while. Some things are kind of picking up in my personal life. But beyond that, yep, go see Undeath on tour. Pick up any of their albums. More Insane is out on Prosthetic. Excellent record. And with that, see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.